Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, you will be learning about Appium Inspector and how you will use Appium Inspector to inspect elements on Android applications. You will also learn about a few tips and tricks which you can use to speed up the process of finding the elements in the inspector as well as in your automation test. So stay tuned for that. We'll be talking about that in the later part of this video. There are also timestamps marked in the video. So in case if you want to jump around in the video and see different contents of the video, you can jump around using the timestamps. If you are new to my channel, my name is Vasik Bambu, and on this channel I create videos related to test automation and tips and tricks related to test automation. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon so that you get notified whenever a new video is posted on this. Let's jump into the video. Before we start with the video and go in detail about how we can use Appium Inspector, let's first understand what benefits does Appium Inspector provides us. Firstly, it will help in identifying the locators of the elements. Also, it will help you generate pre-populated locator strategies, which Appium Inspector can find itself. So basically, if it finds accessibility ID, it will show it to you. And if it finds any suitable locator strategy, for example, in Android or in iOS, if it finds any specific locator strategy, then it will show it to you. Else, it will help you in debugging your locator strategies also. For example, you can build your own UI selector locator strategy, and you can debug that locator strategy by using the inspector and see whether that locator strategy is working fine or not. Apart from that, it will also help in doing different actions on the elements or doing different actions on the device itself, like so doing some swipe gestures or tapping on the element and so on. Also, it will help you in connecting to the local connected emulator or device, and it will also help you in connecting to a cloud-based device. In case if you don't want to install the inspector on your local machine, you can also use the web-based APM inspector, which I'll show you other in a different video. So let's start with today's video. Before we install APM inspector, there is some prerequisites which you need to have on your machine. Firstly, you need to have your machine set up properly for your Android automation. To see that your machine is properly set up for Android automation, you need to check it using ATM Doctor for Android. When you execute this, it will check the setup of the machine, that your machine is properly set up to run ATM Inspector or ATM server. So this you can see that our machine is completely set up, and we are good to run APM server on our machine. To see how we can set up our machine to run APM on it, we will see this in detail in upcoming videos. Now let's download APM Inspector on our machine. We'll go to the GitHub repository of APM Inspector, where you can find the latest release of APM Inspector and download the installer depending on the platform we are using. So in my case, I'm using Mac, so I'll download the DMG file, which I've already downloaded and installed on my machine. So in case you are using Windows, you will use it.exe, and in case you are using Linux, then there are different Linux specific also. Uh, Linux specific package also available. Let's launch the APM inspector. So when you first launch the application, this is how it will look. We will expand this to cover the page. Now to connect APM inspector on our local emulator, first let's create the capabilities which is required to connect to the local emulator. We'll give platform name as Android. We'll give platform version as 12. You can see this in the emulator which we have created in the Android Studio. So you can see that we have created Android emulator of Android 11. We'll modify this to use Android 11. And we'll give the device name, which is Pixel 5, Pixel 6 Pro. I will give automation name as UI Automator 2. And we need to give the app capability with the path of the application which we will install. So let's download the sample application. We will use WebDriver IO sample app, which is available for Android and iOS. We'll search for that and go to its GitHub repository, and we'll download the latest release from the release there. So here we can download the .apk file, which is required to install in the in our emulator. Let's wait until it's getting downloaded. So now the APK is downloaded. We'll get the path from the downloads folder. Go to the downloads folder, and we'll press the option key and right click on this file. So we can get this option, copy its file name as path. And we'll go in the inspector and we'll paste the file. Lastly, we'll add the AVD name. AVD. So to get the actual virtual device name, we'll use a command line called emulator list AVDL. So it will list the AVD names of the emulators which we have created on our local machine. So we'll be using this Pixel 6 Pro. We'll copy this AVD name and we'll paste it over here. So what it will do is it will help in starting the emulator on its own. We don't need to do it manually. So this pretty much looks pretty good. I will save this in case we will require it later on. So we'll give Android WDI and we'll save it. So once we save it, we can see this in the saved capability sets. Now to start this session, we need to first start the Appium server. We are using Appium NV. We are using Appium 2.0 on our machine. So we will start the Appium server using the Appium command line. We are not using the Appium server application, which is a separate exe application, because it is still using Appium 1.2.22. So let's start the Appium server. And we'll be using running on localhost. We'll give address. And we'll be running on port 4723. Here we'll be using the Android driver UI Automator 2 and the base path as WD Hub. So you can see this Appium server has started locally. We'll find the Appium Inspector to connect to that server running instance. So here the host and port are default. It will connect to default localhost and 4723 port now. So here base path also we have set /wd/hub. If you have not set it, you can write it down and it will be saved for later. Now once we click on the start session, the session should start. But in this case, it will fail because it requires app wait activity. So we need to give that capability. So we are not aware which wait activity it is. So we'll get that from the error which we will get. So we'll start the session. We'll be getting an error which will specify the activity name which we can use to wait for that activity to start. Because this application gives a splash screen before it launches fully. So we need to wait for the main activity to get loaded. We got the activity name over here, main activity. We'll copy that. And in the capability, we'll add one more capability, app wait activity. We'll get this activity name over here. Close the error message, click on save and start the session again. Now this time the session should start properly. So you can see that the session has loaded successfully. We'll reduce the size so you can see the simulator simultaneously. Now, how you will inspect the elements? So for inspecting the element, you can hover on each of the element and you can see that the elements are getting highlighted as yellow. When you click on that, you will see the element selected in the hierarchy tree in the center of this inspector. And in the right side of the inspector, you can see the different attributes of that element. For example, if I click on this parent, you can see that it is forms and the accessibility ID is also available for us. So we can directly click on this to get copy the accessibility ID and we can use it in our test. Similarly, you can see that the inspector is generating the locators on its own. It is if it is finding a particular locator strategy, it is creating it for you, so you don't need to worry about that. So, for example, in this particular element, it is not able to find the accessibility ID. It is able to find the ID of the element. So, ID is a different thing. Accessibility ID is a different thing. So, ID basically is the actual ID of the element, and accessibility ID is the accessibility label which a developer gives to that element. So, those two things are different. Now, for example, in this particular example, if you want to see like which locator strategy is the fastest one, for example, accessibility ID is fast or XPath is fast. So we can check that by clicking on the get timings button. Once we click on the get timings button, we'll see like which locator strategies get is taking how much time. So in this case, accessibility ID is taking 11 milliseconds and XPath is taking 600 plus milliseconds. Now, in case if we want to build a locator strategy in our own on our own, for example, I want to I want to get the locator strategy for this particular label. So as we can see, accessibility ID is not defined for this, but ideally we should not use the XPaths. So let's create a locator strategy using UI selector. So what we'll do, we'll select the text and we'll go in the search button and we'll select UI automator selector. Here we need to build the UI selector. We can do that by writing new UI selector and then dot text starts with. Here we can paste the text and we'll remove the few text. We'll just put demo app and we'll click on search. So you can see that we are able to find that particular label by just building a UI selector on our own. And we have tested that this UI selector is working fine and it is able to find the locator, find the element. So this is how we can debug our locator strategy. And once it is working fine, we can use that locator strategy in our test. Another thing we can do is we can tap on different elements. For example, if I want to tap on login button, so I'll just select the login and I'll click on this tap button. So it will tap on the actual device itself. It will tap on that element, and we are now focusing on that new page. Now, for example, if I want to enter the email in this email text box, I can select the element and I'll click on the send keys button. So here I can send any keys. You can see that when I enter the text, it is entered in the device also. Similarly, you can clear the element also. So in case I don't want the text to be there, I'll clear that element. You can also copy the attributes. That's a different thing. Now, for example, if I want to swipe on element, let's first go into the swipe page so you can see the swipe better. Tap on that. Now, if I want to swipe right to left, I can do that using the swipe by coordinates. I'll click on this button and I'll click on the screen to determine the starting coordinates. And again, I'll click on the screen to determine the ending coordinates. So that way we can swipe on the screen. Now to move back to find the find the elements, I'll click on this select elements. Now I can find these locators. Now coming back to the tips and tricks I was talking in the start of the video. If you notice, the hierarchy of this screen is pretty big. Like if I need to use the arrow keys to just scroll to the right side, and need to scroll like pretty too much of scrolling is required over here. So what will happen is when you find any element using any locator strategy, it will be traversing through this. It will be traversing through this big hierarchy tree. To reduce that, there is a small trick which you can use. Is you can execute. You can set an Appium setting called ignore unimportant. So I'll click on session and I'll click on settings, and then I'll click on update setting and pass that setting. It should be passed in a JSON format. So we'll start with the curly brackets. In the double quotes, I'll enter ignore unimportant views. Now I'll pass it as true and click on execute action. So this action has been executed properly without any error. Now I'll go to the source tab and I'll click the refresh button. Now see the magic. Now you can see that the hierarchy tree has been reduced to only those elements which are visible to the user. So all these elements are visible to the user. Now the finding of the element will be much faster as compared to earlier. I click here, you can see like hardly it took any time for or any locator strategy to find the elements. Earlier, like we had seen that XPath also was taking almost 600 milliseconds, but now it is like finding very fast. Also, there is one more thing which you can do is you can also give a capability called auto grant permissions. So in some applications, you need to provide permissions depending on the application. There are some permissions which we need to give to that application. So if we are testing such application, we don't want to automate those pop-ups. So what we can do is we can provide a property called auto grant permissions. We can verify that we are using proper capability by clicking on desired capability documentation. We'll find auto grant permission. So here we can see that this is the auto grant permissions. We are using it correctly. And this is a boolean. So we'll say it as true. We'll say it. We can also do one more thing over here. We can add the Appium settings using the capabilities also. Instead of setting it after the starting the session, we can do that while starting the session. So like we can give Appium settings, and in the square bracket I will give ignore unimportant views, close bracket, and I'll select boolean, then set it as true. I'll save and start the session. You can see that this Appium setting is applied directly when it started the session. So these are some of the things which you can use to improve the performance of your Android automation. That's it for for today's video. Click on the like button and share this video to your friends so they will also get some help with this video. Share your thoughts and feedbacks in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.